Well, one of the things that I was, by the way, and I've been very impressed, the quality of the speeches, sometimes the rhetoric, is really, really good. I mean, there's some great eloquence on the floor of the House, and we heard some great eloquence today bashing the plan to create more jobs. We heard that tonight. We've heard eloquent speeches bashing the president's plan to create more jobs. We've heard eloquent speeches bashing and bashing and bashing. We also heard, you'll recall, very eloquent speeches from our friends on the Democratic side, bashing when we were talking about trying to cut wasteful spending. And you know, they just hate that. They hate when you talk about that. And I mentioned some examples, but I want to make sure that nobody thinks that, well, because when you add that up, it's only $100 million. Some people say that. We've heard that here. It's only $100 million.
Only 100.
Only $100 million. Ask the American people if that's just only $100 million on some pretty sad things. But it gets worse than that. And when we talk about these things, we get bashed by the Democrats. When we talk about, for example, and we were mentioning facts before. It's important to not just spew rhetoric, but bring some facts to the discussion. You know, the federal government cannot account for, you need to listen to this, the federal government cannot account for $17.3 billion it spent in the year 2001. $17 billion unaccounted for. And yet, some criticize us when we talk about let's have some accountability. Let's not misspend. Let's look at ways that we can save some of this money. $17 billion is not peanuts. That is a lot of money unaccounted for. The federal government made $20 billion in overpayments in the year 2001. $20 billion in overpayments. People that weren't qualified or things that should have not been funded. The Department of Housing and Urban Development made $3.3 billion, and I repeat, billion with a B, billion dollars in overpayments in 2001, accounting for 10% of the department's budget. 10% in overpayments, in waste. And yet, some will tell us that there's not enough money up here, that we need to raise taxes on the hardworking Americans, that we shouldn't incentivize the economy by letting more hardworking Americans keep some of their money. No, because there isn't enough money in D.C. Oh, of course not. When you misspend 10% of a department's budget. But some will tell you the answer is, no problem. Don't worry about that. Let's just squeeze the American taxpayer a little bit more, a little bit harder. Because you know something? It's okay. They won't mind. Or they can't yell loud enough, so let's just squeeze them a little bit louder, a little bit tighter. No, it's time that we don't squeeze them anymore, that we allow them to keep more of their money so that they can spend it and they can create jobs. But if the gentleman would allow me, I'd like to mention a couple of other, I think, rather interesting examples. The Department of Agriculture was unable to account for $5 billion in receipts and expenditures. $5 billion. Medicare overpayments totaled $12 billion in 2001. $12 billion. You know, the Republican majority has passed a Medicare prescription drug plan without raising taxes. We've done it. Actually, the House did it last year as well, but the other party refused to do so. But now we've done it again, and we're going to pass it again. Well, you want to find where some of the money can come from? There's $12 billion in overpayments. That's money that's not going for the elderly that need it. That's not going for the elderly that deserve it. That's not going for the elderly who have paid into it. No, that's just waste. That's just waste. And that is unacceptable. That's immoral. Totally immoral. So yes, we're going to do it. There's been a lot of rhetoric for 40 years. The other party's been talking about it. It took the Republican majority to pass it. And we've passed it again in the House. And we're going to do that. But we need to make sure that this kind of waste stops. Because that's our hard-working Americans who are paying for it. The food stamp program pays approximately $1.3 billion in overpayments each year. What can we do with that $1.3 billion for health care, for education, for defense, to incentivize our economy? A lot. And yet, when we talk about these things, our friends on the Democratic Party get really upset. They say, no, you can't do that. You have to tax the American people more. Don't look at fraud. Don't look at waste. Don't look at abuse. Just tax the American people more. Is collected is lost in erroneous earned income tax payments each year. And again, the list goes on and on and on. And we're not talking small amounts of money. If we were speaking about small amounts of money, that would be no excuse. We still have to stop it because it's not government's money. It's the people's money. But what's even worse is that we're talking about billions of dollars in misspent, misused, lost money, and some want to tax the American workers, tax the American family more to do more of this. I don't understand it.
I don't understand it either, and the waste, fraud, and abuse cries out for a razor-sharp focus on what can we do to scale away those costs that are burdening our economy. And we can get back to a sound fiscal picture only by sparking this economy with the kind of tax relief, jobs proposal that we passed, and by controlling that spending with a razor-sharp focus, as they say, on waste, fraud, and abuse. And, you know, they know how to spend money better back home in Florida, back home in Minnesota, than we do in Washington. They wouldn't put up with that. They'd drill to the bottom of those issues and find out what was causing it and uncover the waste, fraud, and abuse and get it out of the system. But what could they do, for example, with the dividend and capital gains reductions that we have passed? You know, when I studied economics, they told me it was investments that drive jobs. It's when you invest in the economy, that's when you drive jobs. And where does those investments come from? Those investments come from savings. And this bill encourages savings by reducing the double taxation on dividend and the excessively high compared to many other countries tax that we have on investment income. We should be taxing income at its source, but when we discourage investment and have the very low investment rate that we have here in America, we're hurting our economy. And who is receiving most of those dividends? I think it's important to point out it's primarily seniors that are receiving those dividends. And they've paid taxes on that in the business. They've paid taxes all their life. Why are we charging them this double investment? And you know, we have a concern here with having good fiscal responsibility. One of the big benefits of the dividend and capital gains proposals, we've talked about it, is by encouraging more businesses to be giving their dividends back to shareholders. You're going to be having less cash stockpiled in the company. That's going to be better for us keeping track and holding our businesses accountable. It's also going to make the balance between debt and equity less tilted towards debt. Right now we have such higher tax benefits for fully deductible debt, on interest on debt, and yet on dividends coming out of a business, we're taxing them twice unfairly. By getting that balance more in line, you're going to really have a stronger, sounder capital structure, more equity in our businesses so they can withstand downfalls without having to lay off employees. And again, our focus here is what can we do to create jobs? How can we run our ship more efficiently here by scaling back on waste, fraud, and abuse so that we have to take less out of the pockets of small businesses and hardworking families and let them get on with the business of America, the business of creating jobs, expanding the economy, and taking care of our families.